So Shalom Aleichem. Today's Daf Yomi is the Daf Yomi for Shabbos Kodesh, and we are on Bava Basra Daf Samach, Bava Basra 68. We're recording this a day in advance, and so we want to note that that this is the last daf in Parachas Habat and strengthening of the homes, and maybe this should be a chazaka for our homes. It should be a Yeshua for Am Yisrael, Atzal for the Shvuyim, and a Shmira for the Chayalim. The daf Yomi tells us, Yiftach Adam L'Chatzer Ashutvin Petach Keneged Petach. A person is not allowed to open up another doorway into the courtyard of the partners. And if he shares a courtyard with another person, he's not allowed to open up an entranceway opposite the entranceway of the other person, or a chalon keneged chalon. He can't open up a window opposite his window. He can't open up an entranceway or a window opposite this partner's entranceway or window. Hayakatan, if his entranceway was small, yasenu gadol. He can't make it big. Echad, if it was one opening, yasenu shnayim, and we'll see why. Aval poteach u'rishus harabim, but he's allowed to open into the public domain a petach keneged petach, an opening into the public domain opposite the public domain, the chalon keneged chalon, a window opposite the window. Hayakatan ostel gadol. If it was a small opening, he can make it bigger. The echad into the public domain. The echad osel toshnayim. And if it's one opening, he can turn it into two opposite the public domain. So first, the Gemara says, what's the reason why a person can't open up into the courtyard of the partners? What's the reason why a person cannot open up into the courtyard of the partners? A doorway opposite his doorway or a window opposite his window. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Amar Kol, because it says about Bilam, Vayisam Bilam Asina, Vayaris Yisrael Shochen, and Bilam's Shochen was Shvatav, that he opened up his eyes and he saw the Jewish people dwelling in their tribes. What did he see? So Mara Rosh Ein Pisle Oaleam the Kuvanan Zelzeh. He saw that their openings were not opposite the other opening. And so therefore he said, he said, these people, it's so appropriate that the divine presence should rest upon them. Rashbam says he saw this, he saw that they were dwelling with this modesty, that they weren't looking into each other's doorways, and he said, Matovu Yaakov, how beautiful are your dwelling places, that your tents don't open, that you don't look straight into the other person's doorway. If it was a small doorway, your Mishnah says, I can't make it big. What does that mean? So some Rami Bar Chama thought to say Bar Dalet, if it was a doorway of 4 amos, Lo Ishva Bar Tamanya, you can't make it 8 amos. Or if it was a dekel, Shakil Tamanya Deka Shakil Tamanya B'chatzir, because then you're going to get 8 amos in the courtyard. And the assumption is that if you have a doorway opening of 4 amos, you can have a loading dock in front of it, another area to load up of 4 amos. So he said if it's 4, you can't make it into 8, because then you're going to take 8 amos in the courtyard, and that you're not allowed. Aval bar tarti, but if it's 2 amos, l'shvai bar arba, then you can make it into 4, because you're allowed to have a loading area of 4 amos, regardless of whether or not your door is 2 amos. So therefore, he thought that was okay. Shop your dummy. So Amrle Rava, no. Matzi Amrle, no, he's still allowed to block him. Aside from the fact that he's not gaining access to more loading area, it's a question of modesty. Matzi Amrle, you could say to him, if there's a small opening, I have more privacy. If it was a larger opening, I have no modesty. I have less modesty. If there was one doorway, you can't turn it into 2. Savar Rami Bar Chama, hold on. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shehakol niyeh b'dvaro. So we said that Savar Rami Bar Chama Meimer. So here too, Rami Bar Chama thought to say Bar Arbaya lo yeshvu yetrei, that if there's a doorway of 4 amos, you can't make it into 2, because so if it was a doorway of if it was a 4 amos wide doorway, then he couldn't make it into 2 trey bane tarte. He can't make it into 2 doorways, each one of 2 amos, because then maybe he's taking 4 amos for each doorway in the courtyard, and that's too much. Of a bar tamanya, which way b'nei arba, but if it's 8 amos doorway, you can turn into 2 doorways of 4 amos. Shop your dummies. He might have thought that that's okay. So Amrle Rava, Rava said, no, he won't be able to do that, even though he's not getting more loading area. Matzi Amrway, Bechad Pitcha Matzina Tzinui Minach, Betrayal Matzina Tzinui Minach. He said it's a question of privacy. With one doorway, I have ability to be more discreet. But with two, I can't, I have less privacy. Meaning to say, if there's one doorway, they can know when it's closed, and they can be private. When there are two doors, you don't know which one's open, which one's closed. That's how Rashbam explains it. So then the Gemara says, "Oh, petach," but he's allowed to make another opening into the public domain, even if it's opposite a doorway in the public domain, because the Amrway meaning to say, if it's a doorway that goes into the public domain, then he doesn't have to be concerned. Because the reason is, he's saying that in the end, anyways, you have to hide yourself from the people in the public. So the fact that my doorway is there and you're both facing the public, then it can open up because there's no issue of privacy in that area. Next Mishnah. Not allowed to make a space in the public domain, even if you cover it in the public domain of ditches or caravans. You can't make that on a public street. But Rabbi Eliezer allows it. He allows it as long as the wagon can go over that area that you covered up carrying stones, then you're allowed to make such an area and cover it up. Emotzi and zizin because you're not allowed to have your ledges or your protrusions go into the public domain. But if he wants, he can recess his property and then have the ledges going out, but they're still in his property. Let's say he bought a courtyard and already has these protrusions and ledges in it. That is already considered in his domain. The Rabbanan who say that you can't do it even if it's covered up, you can't build these ditches in public, because sometimes it'll be diminished and he won't realize it. And meaning to say, it'll cause and you'll fall in public and you won't do proper maintenance on the bridge, as we've seen too many times in life. You're not allowed to allow the protrusions to go into public. So Rav Ami had a protrusion, a ledge that went into the alleyway. There was a guy who also had a ledge, but his didn't go into the alleyway, his was protruding into the public domain. Also coming to Rabbi Ami, so they came to Rabbi Ami, and Rabbi Ami said, "Zeal coats, go cut it down." He said, "Hold on one second." So he said to him, so he says, "You also have a protrusion going to the alleyway." So he said, Rabbi Ami responded, "Mapik." So he says, "Mamar Islay Nami Islay." So he says, "Didilu Mavoa Mapik." Rabbi Ami says, "My protrusion is going into an alleyway. B'nei Mavoa Machlin Gabai, and the people of the alleyway, they don't care. They let me do it. Didach or Shusarabah Mapik. Yours goes into public. Man Machl Gabach. How are you going to get permission from the public? Yes, today you can get permission from the city, but in those days it was harder." Rabbi Yanai had a tree that went into the public domain. There was a man there who also had a tree going into public. Also, so the people came and they said, "We want to stop this person from having his tree." Also, coming to Rabbi Yanai. So the guy went to Rabbi Yanai, and Rabbi Yanai had an issue here because he also had a tree going into the public. So he said to the man, he says, "Go away now and come back tomorrow." That night, Rabbi Yanai sent somebody down to cut his own tree. The next day, the person came to Rabbi Yanai. He said, "Go cut the tree." So the guy says, "Hamar nami islay," but you, Rabbi Yanai, also have a tree. He said, "Listen, go and check. If my tree is cut down, then you should cut yours as well. If yours is not cut down, if mine is not cut down, then you shouldn't do it." So the Gemara says, well, why did Rabbi Yanai wait? Meikar my sever, or sof my sever. Why in the beginning did he not cut down his tree, and only in the end did he cut down his tree? Gemara says, Meikar sever nichu ubnei rosh hasharamti yasri betui. He says, at first I thought the people in the public would like my shade, given the chazal to come afu, but now I saw that they don't like it. Shadar katzi, cut it down. Gemara says, why didn't Rabbi Yanai say to him, Zil kotzi dach, v'adar kotzi ti, cut down yours, and then I'll cut down mine? Mishum deresh lakish. No, that he's not going to say. He said, his koshu v'koshishu. Clean yourself of straw and clean others of straw. This is a pasuk from Tzefanya, which means first clean your own house and then clean other people's. Says the Mishnah, but if he wants to, he could bring the wedge, he could recess his property and then have the protrusion in his own property. Whereas the question, let's say he recessed in his property, but he didn't put out the wedges. Can he now protrude the wedges? It was still in his own property. Rav Yochanan said, "Kanas amotzi." He can do that. Rish Lakish amar kanas ve'eno motzi. Rish Lakish said he can't do that. He can't do that. So the Gemara says, hold on one second. Rav Yochanan amar kanas motzi. Rish Lakish amar kanas eno motzi. Amrulei Rabbi Yaakov Rabbi Yomer Partaklifa Azbrocha. I'll explain it to you. Lahotzi koyama lapoli demotzi. If it's a beam, and he wants to extend the beam, everyone says it's allowed to. But Kipwigi, where are we arguing? If he wants to now put his walls back to where they were originally. The Ipcha Rabbi Yochanan says you can't put back the walls. He says you could turn the walls. Rabbi Yochanan you can't bring back the walls. Mishum de Rabbi Yehuda. Because of Rabbi Yehuda, who taught them, Rabbi Yehuda made once there's people who have the right of way to walk on a certain path, you're not allowed to go back and take it. Rish Lakish Amar Machzir. When do we say that you can't undo it where there's no other place for them to walk? But here there's a space, and therefore, even if it goes back to the original place, there's still space for people to walk. Question is, if you take a courtyard and it has protrusions in it, then we assume that that's the chazaka and you can keep them there. Says the Gemara, that if there's a house and the courtyard collapsed, you can go back and rebuild it again. Meaning to say, just like it was before with the wedges and the balconies extending from it. So once it falls down, you still have the right to rebuild it. So the Gemara challenges this because it says you're not allowed to plaster a wall with lime, nor ornaments or paints after the base of Mikdash. Let's say the house you have has this lime, has this ornaments or this painting, then it's allowed to be done. So nafla, but once it falls down, eno chozer bonosa. If it falls down, you're not allowed to rebuild it with it. So the Gemara says, no, it's not the same case. Isur shani. This is different from something that's prohibited, but something that's a monetary law. Something that's prohibited, you can't do, but a monetary law, it's the status. Tana Rabbanan, what does this mean that you're not allowed to plaster the walls of your house and after the base of Mikdash was destroyed? Tana Rabbanan, well, Yasud Adam has space of a sid. Vim erbo chol tevin mutter. But if you mix in sand or straw, it's allowed. Rabbi Yehuda says erbo chol harei terachse ve'asar. If you mix sand in it, the mixture is very strong and it's prohibited. Tevin mutter, but with straw it's permitted. Tana Rabbanan k'shacharav habayis b'shniya, when the second temple was destroyed, Rabu Prushim b'Yisrael. Many Jews became Prussian, they became ascetics, they started afflicting themselves. They weren't eating meat or drinking wine. Nitbo and Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua wanted to say that they shouldn't do that. Why are you not eating meat or drinking wine? How can we eat meat? The meat was used to make sacrifices, and we're going to eat it. Now we don't have a temple. How can we drink wine? It was used as a libation. And now there's no, and now it's no more. How can we do that? So Amar Lahan. So he said to them, Rabbi Shua said to them, if that's the case, we shouldn't eat bread. Then we shouldn't bring bread because now there's no more grain offerings. And they agreed. Shabbat Peros, so you can eat fruits. Peros Rabbi Shua says we shouldn't eat fruit because we don't have the Bikurim. He says, yeah, I'm sure we learn from our parsha that we know in our parsha, Rashi says that the Gemara in Brachos says about the Bikurim only applies to the 7 species. So he says, we shouldn't drink water because there's no longer water libation. So they were silent. And so therefore, you have to eat and drink even though the base of Mikdash was destroyed. I'll explain to you that the proper way is not to mourn at all. That's not possible. Because there's already a decree. To mourn too much, and you can't mourn too much. You can't make too much of a decree unless the community can stand by it. You are cursed with a curse, yet you rob me, the entire nation. But this is what the sages said. What you should do is you should apply some plaster to your house and leave a small area of it unplastered. The Amar of Yosef, Amma, 1 amma by 1 amma. And Amar of Chisda, Keneged Pesach, opposite the door. Also, Adam called Sorche Sudo, Mishar Davar Muat. You should make a whole meal and should leave out a small part. Mahi, what's the small thing? Amar Papa Kasa the Harsanai. Don't serve fish. Leave that out. The fish hash. Also, Isha call Tashita. You should make all your jewelry. Umushayeras Davar Muat. But she leaves out something. Mahi, what you leave out? Amarav Bas Tzera. She should leave out the hair on the temple. They used to remove such hair. Basically, and then it says in the pasuk, if I don't bring Jerusalem over my joy. This refers to the ashes that are placed on the heads of the grooms at the sign of the mourning. And I'm like, where should they put it? They should put it in the place of the tefillin. It says, you should appoint for the mourners of Zion to give them adornments in the place of the ashes. Whoever mourns for Jerusalem should merit to see its joy, as it says, rejoice for Jerusalem. On the day the temple is destroyed, we should really decree upon ourselves not to eat meat and not to drink wine. You may only make a decree, most people can uphold it. And because from the day of that evil decree, they made very wicked decrees upon us, and they deprive us to study Torah mitzvos. They don't allow us to attend a circumcision. So there, we should make a decree not to get married and not to have children. This would cause Abraham's descendants to be destroyed. Let them celebrate. Don't tell them not to do it, and let them celebrate so that they don't be deliberate violators. It's impossible to live a life in total mourning. We went through this very quickly. God willing, on Shabbos we'll go much slower with this daf, with this beautiful, beautiful daf.